Welcome to Testify. Today we take a look at the Book of Lamentations. Lamentations is a unique book in the Old Testament. It contains 5 poems from an anonymous author who survived Babylon's siege of Jerusalem and the exile of the Israelites. In this book, he reflects on that event. The fall of Jerusalem and their exile was the worst event in Israel's history up to this point. God had promised Abraham the land of Canaan and had given David the instruction to make Jerusalem the capital of Israel. This city is where the kings from the line of David lived, where Solomon built the temple for the God of Israel, and where the priests maintained the rituals of Israel's worship. After 500 years of all this history, the city fell to Babylon and everything was lost. The Book of Lamentations is a memorial to the pain and confusion of the Israelites that followed the destruction. Lamentations shows how prayerful lament is a crucial part of our journey of faith in a broken world. To lament is to express grief or sorrow. Prayerful lament is to cry to God. Now, the 5 lament poems found in the Book of Lamentations are not unique in the Bible, as there are many of them found in the Book of Psalms. These biblical poems of lament are a form of protest. They draw everyone's attention, including God's, to the horrible things that happen in His world that should not be tolerated. They are also a way of processing emotion. In these poems, God's people vent their anger and dismay at the ruin caused by their sin and violence. The design of the 5 poems in the Book of Lamentations is very intentional and part of the book's message. Chapters 1 to 4 are made up of acrostics or alphabet poems, in which each poetic verse begins with a new letter of the Hebrew alphabet, consisting of 22 letters. Lamentations Chapter 1, Grief, Shame, and Trauma personified in Lady Zion. Chapter 1 focuses on the grief and shame of a figure called Lady Zion, referring to the city of Jerusalem as a widow, also referred to as the daughter of Zion. She sits alone, bereaved of her loved ones, devastated, and with no one to comfort her. When Lady Zion speaks, she calls on the Lord to notice her fate. It's a powerful metaphor. Through this imagery, the poet shows that Jerusalem's destruction brought a new level of psychological trauma on the Israelites that can only be expressed as a funeral as they mourn the death of a loved one. The death of the loved one in this case is Jerusalem. Lamentations 2, The Fall of Jerusalem and God's Wrath. Chapter 2 focuses on the fall of Jerusalem and how it was a consequence of Israel's sin, brought about by God's wrath. The wrath of God is a key word in this poem. God's wrath is not spontaneous, volatile anger. He brought prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah to warn the people to turn from their sin, but to no avail. Israel entered a covenant agreement that they have been violating for centuries through their worship of other gods and allowing injustice towards the poor. While God is slow to anger, He does still get angry at human evil and will eventually bring His justice in the form of punishment. In the case of Jerusalem, He allowed Babylon to conquer the city. Chapter 2 acknowledges that God's wrath was justified, but this doesn't keep the poet from lamenting and asking God to once again show compassion on Jerusalem. Lamentations 3, Hope for Justice in the Midst of Grief. Chapter 3 portrays the voice of a lonely, suffering man who speaks as a representative of the entire people of Israel. This chapter is full of language drawn from other parts of the Old Testament, including the laments of Job, laments of Psalms, and even the suffering servant poems in Isaiah. One of the key verses in chapter 3 is, Because of the Lord's covenant faithfulness, we do not perish. His mercies never fail. They are new every morning. How great is your faithfulness, O God! So I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance, therefore I will put my hope in Him. The poet goes on to say, if God is consistent enough to bring His justice on Israel's evil, then He will also be consistent with His covenant promises and not allow evil and sin to get the last word. For this poet, God's judgment becomes the seed of hope. Lamentations 4, contrasting life before and during the Babylonian siege. Chapter 4 contrasts how great things were in the Jerusalem of the past with how terrible it was during the destruction by Babylon. Children once laughed in the streets, Now they beg for food. The wealthy once ate lavish meals. Now they look for whatever they can find in the dirt. The royal leaders were once full of splendor. Now they are dirty and unrecognizable. Their anointed king, from the line of David, has now been captured and dragged away. The poems show the depth of the suffering Israel has brought on itself. Lamentations 5, a communal prayer for God's mercy. The final poem is a long communal prayer for God's mercy. Israel begs God not to ignore their pain or abandon them. The poem also offers a long list of all the different kinds of people who were devastated by Jerusalem's fall and asks God not to forget them. This lament poem is written on behalf of others to give expression to their pain. As God's people, Lamentations teaches us not to deny our emotions, but rather to voice our protest, to vent, and to pour it all out before God. The book ends as the poet acknowledges that God is the eternal king. But Israel's circumstances make it feel like God is nowhere to be found. The end of this book leaves us with the question, has God abandoned his people because of disobedience? The message of this book, however, shows how lament and prayer are a crucial part of the journey of faith in a broken world. And that ends this Bible study. Please join us for more.